22 paces. So that checks good. Let's go ahead and fly. For the first hover, I want to go ahead and check the tail rotor trim with the gyro in the rate mode. This is just the way it came off the bench. Let's see what it does. Oh, look at that. If you have to make a tail rotor pushrod adjustment, just remember righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So if you pull the two push rods together to make them tighter, the nose will move to the right. If you loosen those two push rods or move them farther apart, the nose will go to the left, and that's just an easy way to keep that straight. Okay, the tail rotor trim is good. Now let's go ahead and check the cyclic trim. I've got a little wind shift going on. The wind is coming right off to the right of me here. The cyclic trim is pretty good. Good enough that, again, that's about as good as you're going to get with a helicopter. So I'm not going to make any cyclic trim adjustments. But if you need to make a cyclic change, don't make it with the trim levers. Because for instance, if you're out of whack in the normal flight mode, and then you go into flight mode number 1 or number 2, then the trims will be out of whack in flight mode number 1 or number 2. If you get everything as close as you can in the normal flight mode, then when you go into flight mode 1 or 2, you'll just have to make very minor trim adjustments, if any at all. So that's why you want to do everything, all of the initial trim adjustments with the push rods mechanically. And now I can go ahead and move the gyro into the heading hold mode. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go up to the gyro page. And for flight mode normal, position 0. So now we're in heading hold. Now I want to go ahead and lift it off and play with the tail rotor input and gradually increase the tail rotor gain until we get the gyro to wag, and then we'll back off. So again, we're starting at 75% here, heading hold. That's pretty good. Let's try 80%. We want to have a little buffer here because when I go from a hover into forward flight is always going to put the gyro into a wag before a hover. So I don't want to, we'll just see what 80% does or 85% does and go from there. Okay, now we started to pick up some wag there. And also, just take a look at this pirouette rate. This pirouette rate is pretty good. That's full tail rotor. If you need something, okay, there I'm picking up a little wag. I think I'm going to back down to 75%. If you need a pirouette rate that's faster than this, you would want to go out one hole on the tail rotor servo arm. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 75%. I'm going to go back to 75% and call it good because we're starting to get the onset of wag at 80%. All gyros are going to have a little bit of drift. So if you're hovering the helicopter and the nose has a slight tendency to go to the left or toward the right, it's okay to put in 1 or 2 bumps of tail rotor trim. Don't go too far or the helicopter will actually start to motor to the right or to the left depending on what trim you put in, but 1 or 2 bumps of tail rotor trim is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and lift off the machine and just give you a little demonstration here. Okay, that is hands off right there and heading hold. Now I'm going to give 1 bump of right trim, okay, and you can see how very slowly it's moving to the right. Now I'm going to give 2 bumps of left trim, okay, nothing is really happening. Let's give, well, yeah, it's coming back slowly. There. That's the 3rd bump of left trim, and you can see how the machine is starting to motor to the left now. So again, a couple of bumps, there's hands off, that's perfect. A couple of bumps of tail rotor trim is perfectly fine. Okay, next, what I want to do is show you how nicely the helicopter flies around when we use high trim. Now, most of the helicopter in the normal flight mode, most of the flying is going to be done between a 1/4 stick and full stick. So this high trim helps hold the rotor RPM if you drop down below 1/4 stick. So right here is full load trim, here is half trim, and here's full high trim. And let's see how she flies around. And look how nice and beautiful the whole RPM, how it holds the RPM, really nice. Up, down, up, down. Now, if the rotor system would underspeed through 1/4 stick or half stick, you'd kick up those points. And if the rotor would overspeed through 1/4 stick or half stick, you'd drop down those points. As it is, the rotor RPM is just, you can see how really nice it is in the normal flight mode, so we don't have to change anything. Now, if you remember, we set up the pitch for plus 10 degrees of pitch. When I'm climbing out, I'm getting a little bit of overspeed, so what I can actually do for that normal flight mode is go ahead and increase the pitch from, I believe we had it at 91. we can go from 91 to, and let's just see what it is. Yeah, we had it set to 91. I could probably almost go to 100% pitch in the normal flight mode without it overspeeding. Let's go ahead and just do that. And let's see what this is like in the normal climb out. Yeah, that holds better. So we can run plus 12 degrees of pitch here in the normal flight mode. Little nose in hover. And the wind is kicking up here a little bit on me. Now if you notice a little bit of a bobble, there was a little bit of a bobble back there. That's because the O-rings are new, and as the helicopter gets a little bit of flight time on it and the O-rings break in, that little bobble will go away, so I'm really not concerned about that. Before I do hovering autos, I want to go ahead and check the tail rotor pitch and also to make sure that the motor doesn't run with the throttle hold switch on. The position is 5%, there's throttle hold, and because we didn't change anything from the bench setup, the tail rotor pitch is still at flat pitch, 0 degrees, that's good. Now the hold position is 5%, so I'm going to decrease that, 2%, okay, there's 1%, and the motor kicks on. So now there's 7%, 8%, it's still running. Okay, 9.5. So I'm going to use the throttle hold at minus 10%, so I know that the motor won't run when I flip into throttle hold. Okay, we're going to do some hovering autos. Again, note the inertia here. This is with the non-driven tail rotor. I'm going to do some pretty high hovering autos. I would not suggest that you do high hovering autos if you have the driven tail rotor. So let's go ahead and do the autos and see how they work out. Okay, the wind, I want to reposition the camera over here. Okay, we're at hovering autos. First we're going to start a hovering auto here at about 2 feet. And with the non-driven tail rotor it does that easily. Let's go to 3 feet. Let's go to 4 feet or 5. Right there is eye level. Yeah, that wasn't so good. I can do better than that. When you start to get at about 5 feet, you want to start to drop the collective pitch just a little bit. So here's eye level. That one wasn't bad. And then as you go above 5 feet, you actually have to drop the collective pitch. This one's at what, 7 or 8 feet? Again, not bad for a small little electric helicopter. We don't have too much wind. This is at about 10 feet. Not bad. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and do some from altitude. Again, my throttle trim is low so that if I have to do a power recovery, it won't yank the guts out of the machine. Okay, pretty good rate of descent. I'm going to be a little short here. Let's do another one. That one was so-so. Minus 5 degrees of pitch is pretty good. Okay, and again, if you take a look at the windsock, we don't have much wind right now. Let's try another one. I would not want to go with any less than minus 5 degrees of pitch. Okay, now we've just gone into battery save mode. And again, we're using high protection here. Notice how it jerks. See how it jerks, da-da, da-da. And as soon as it starts to do that, go ahead and land the helicopter. Then what I normally do is if the motor starts to jerk, I'll go ahead and put the blinky on it. And if any of the cells are less than 3.2 volts, I'll just make a special note of that battery so that I slow charge it before I bring it up to the regular charge rate of 2.1 amps. Okay, let's go ahead and change batteries and continue on. At the end of a flight, always make sure you disconnect the battery before you turn off the transmitter. And I'm just going to give you a little demonstration here. If you turn off the transmitter, the ship will go into fail-safe mode. And again, I have my fail-safe set at half stick, 0 degrees main rotor pitch. If you set the fail-safe all the way at low throttle, then you don't have to worry about it kicking up that fast. So again, it's your choice. So go ahead, disconnect the battery, and then switch off the transmitter. Now we're ready to start the second tank of electrons. What we can do is you can turn on the transmitter and then you can go ahead and go into throttle hold. That's just a safety feature if the throttle stick gets bumped. And the other thing for our particular setup is it puts the gyro in a rate mode. If the gyro is in heading hold and you move the helicopter and the gyro can't correct for that movement, it'll just drive that servo all the way to the extreme. When we're in the rate mode, the tail rotor servo will stay centered and it won't drive it to the extreme. So I've got throttle hold on. And I always tuck the plug in underneath my rubber band here. And everything is good. As we start the second battery pack, I'm going to go into some aerobatics. So I just want to go ahead and see how the belt tension is doing. And the belt tension is good, still at 1 millimeter. So I'm confident that it'll take aerobatic flight just fine. Okay, let's see what she does upside down. One other thing before we do aerobatics, I want to check the blade tracking. when we go from 65% throttle to 70% throttle for aerobatics, the rotor RPM is really going to kick up substantially, and the blade tracking gets really touchy. So again, we check the blade tracking in the studio, the blade tracking is good here, but when I go into idle up for the first time, I want to check to see how the blade tracking really is. Let's go ahead and check that. Okay, that's good. Here's idle up. And we're looking good. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and roll over to the right. Now that is just a beautiful inverted hover RPM, and that's at 65%. Picking up a little bit of wind here. And I'm going to go ahead and push out. We're going to check the tumble. All right, very nice, real nice tumbles. Now let's do some consecutive rolls, check the aileron to throttle mix. Again, she's really happy. Oh! Oh!
I don't think I got it.
You don't think so?
I think I got some of the shrapnel flying.
Minor damage.
Nice.
Oh, it broke the tail rotor gearbox case. Huh.
Looks like you knocked off one of the blade grips too.
Yeah. Didn't hurt the... Yeah, I crashed. Okay, I thought that I could recover and get my synchronization back in with collective pitch through that second roll. Obviously, I didn't. But like I said in the tape, the damage really isn't too bad. It did break the tail rotor gearbox, took out the horizontal fin and the horizontal fin clamp. It took out the main gear, and because it took out the main gear, it also took out the Sprague bearing. I thought that was pretty interesting. In larger helicopters, there's generally a radial bearing or at least a bronze bushing that supports the main shaft above and below the Sprague bearing. In the T-Rex, there's no such thing, so any high impact is going to ruin the Sprague bearing. When the Sprague bearing was ruined, it also pushed the main gear into the tail rotor drive gear, so that it bent that little shaft that goes up to the tail rotor pulley that drives the tail rotor belt. So if you have a hard crash, make sure you spin that little shaft and make sure that it's straight. In terms of the main rotor head, it did not break. The main rotor blades, because of the plastic blade grips, one plastic blade grip broke. The flybar, of course, was bent. The main shaft was bent. The blade axle was perfectly okay. And the last thing that it broke was the plastic flybar carrier. I told you that sooner or later you're going to break the plastic flybar carrier, so I went and upgraded my flybar carrier to the metal unit. So the ship's all back together, the balance is good, I double-checked the balance, and we're ready to fly. Let's go out to the field and pick up with the flight trimming again. Now I've got a little bit more wind today than I did in the first session, and I really only had a chance to do 2 regular autos before the battery protection kicked in. So I want to go ahead and do a few more autos. You want to make sure that you don't attempt autos with this thing in calm conditions because it's critical on the touchdown. But if you have 5 to 10 miles an hour of wind, that's perfect. So let's give it a go and see what we get. One other thing I want to add just before we do autos is just talk about inertia. The inertia quadruples with double the rotor span. So basically this helicopter has half the rotor span of a Raptor 50 glow-powered helicopter, or possibly even half the rotor span of a T-Rex 600 electric helicopter. So this machine has 1/4 of the inertia of the T-Rex 600 or the Raptor 50.